Okay, so welcome back to another video of, as the previous video, I am Sof. I am an ex-film student. I specialized in sound, and actually today that's the thing I want to talk about, sound, and more specifically sound in Luca Guadagnino's films, and more specifically what it tells us about his characters and his character development. First, I want to start with thanking you if you're here. And thank you if you watched my previous video. I'm very happy with how it's been received online and how many views it has, and considering how long it is, it's really nice to know that there's an audience for it. I'm gonna continue with the video for today. I want to start off the video by giving a bit of context of, because I've had this happen to me a lot when people have asked me what I do, and I say I do sound for film. They tell me, oh, so you do the music, and it has nothing to do with music. I mean, it does, of course, because it's the auditory experience of cinema, but that's as far as it goes. Sound works in many different ways than music does for film. And so I just wanna, first explain a bit how sound works for film, what the stages of sound for film are, and then make a dive into how Luca Guadagnino uses his sound, because as a sound person I've noticed a lack of analysis and a lack of talk about sound in the film community. I always see analysis of direction of photography and the direction and the character work and the production design and all those things, but I never see, and I've never heard a sound analysis that is directed in a more literary way rather than a technical way, because I have seen a lot of technical breakdowns of sound for film, but it's very, very rare that I see a sound analysis from a more critic, more literary, more creative point of view, and that's what I want to do today. I want to touch a bit on that, because I think mostly when we put sound in the conversation of film, we tend to aim it more towards science fiction or action films or horror films, of course, but I think it's very important and very interesting and very special to come across filmographies like Luca Guadagnino's filmography, because he has this very interesting way of utilizing sound to its fullest capacity to enhance the cinematic experience of his movies, and so that's what I want to talk about today. And first off, I want to talk about of course, how sound works for film. What sound basically is everything that's heard that's not music is sound. What I mean by this is when you're on set as a sound recorder on set with the boom and with headphones and all that, what you tend to do and what we tend to do, because that's the area I like the most whilst doing film, of course we have to capture the dialogue as best we can, but also capture the space they're in. Sometimes you go and film trees and birds and reverberation of certain spaces and all those things for it to be the best it can be recorded when it gets to the editing point and to the mixing and the mastering and all of that. And it's basically that from an on-set point. You have to record everything the best it can be recorded, and so then you get to the editing part of it, which comes after image has been fully edited. You get the final cut or final cuts of the film for you to make sense of the collage, the sound collage that you have from the editing, but also to add things that you were not able to record on set, or that don't exist on set, or that you don't have. Because, for example, in Star Wars, which of course is a science fiction and an action film, you don't have the sound of like the guns. You don't, the props didn't make that sound. Ben Burtt had to create that. And so we get to the point in editing where we have to make sense of the collage of sounds, and also to find sounds that could be missing that you didn't get on set, and you go to libraries, or you to like regular libraries, or to your own library that you've created through the years, because sound makers do that a lot of the times, or you go to the Foley department, which is the other part that we see a lot of people on studios recreating sounds with different tools. Like the best example I can give is in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, with the coconuts, like recreating the sound of a horse. That's literally sometimes what they do on studios to recreate the sound of a horse. So you go to the Foley where they do sounds that you can't find on a library, or that you don't like the ones you've found on libraries, and then of course you have extra dialogue recordings, ADRs, if you weren't able to record the dialogue perfectly on set, or that something changed, or that it's not as legible as you wanted it to be, or it wasn't able to be done. And so you have that, and you like make the collage of everything. Then you go to mixing, where they put the effects on everything for the sounds to sound the way you want them to sound. So for example, if on a film you have something like a rock that falls, when you put the effect in the editing stage, most likely it's a clear signal of the sound. So you don't have like how the material affects the sound of a rock, because it's not the same as here, how it sounds here or how it sounds here. Also, you don't have the space, because the space sounds, and you don't have like the many things. And so when you get to mixing, you get to the point where they tell you, okay, you have the sound of the rock that they put on editing, now you have to make it sound the way we want it to. So I don't know, you have to make it sound wet, so you have to equalize it, or you have to make it sound empty around it, and so you have to put a lot of reverb on it, and things like those. Then you go to the mastering, which is basically that leveling everything, the volumes. That is done in mixing, and it's also redone in mastering. Well, not redone, but like perfected, and then you put out that with the rules that apply from the EVO and from Dolby systems of how many decibels and all of those things, like what are the ranges that your movie has to be in and all of that. And then you have the sound for film. And so there's like different layers to what the sound of a movie entails, which are the dialogue, of course, the effects, which is the rock or the gun in Star Wars, or the lightsabers. And you have, of course, the ambience, which is my favorite part of what makes a movie sound good, which is how the place sounds, how the location sounds, how everything around the place sounds. And then you have the music, of course, which is a different monster that I'm not going to talk about today. And within like these four realms of sound on film, each have a different value given to them, and it's very obvious how I've noticed, and I've paid a lot of attention recently because of my thesis for school was about this exact subject. How much of a burden is given to the sound effects on film when you want to tell something through sound on film? Because normally people who make movies, filmmakers, tend to give the narrative weight to dialogues, to subtext, to the photography, to the production design, or to the costume department, and they give you like subtle hints of characters, of alliances, of what's gonna happen through image, which of course it's like clever screenwriting should do that, and clever filmmaking should do that, that you should be able to receive and be touched in all senses through the film, and to get this subconscious messaging throughout the movie, you know. But rarely is sound utilized that way, and of course in horror it's very obvious that the music and the sound and the droning is telling you what to do and how to feel, and the tension and the silence is something's gonna happen. But in normal, regular films, that happens too. The more character-driven ones that are more leaning onto the tragedies and the dramas and the romantic comedies and all those things, they utilize sound too, not necessarily just music, to have the same effect on people and to also give them this same subconscious stimuli that the image is giving us. Because of course you can tell a lot about a character because he's wearing blue, and what color were Shakespeare's curtains and all those things. And sound is rarely used like that, and I've noticed that a lot. I was watching Mission Impossible the other day, and nowhere sounds like nothing. Anywhere sounds the same all the time. And Luca Guadagnino doesn't. And that's what I want to talk about. So, what I noticed doing and watching Luca Guadagnino's filmography that I think really made me connect on a deeper level to his filmmaking is that his movies sound real. And what do I mean by this? Of course, there's a certain sense of reality that filmmakers must have in film in order to make the deal with the spectator, the diegetical creation and the suspense of disbelief is what is called. I'm gonna put like a tiny description of what that means. You have certain rules that you give the spectator when you're creating your work, and you have to follow those rules, and in order for them to believe your fiction is real. And what I really love about Luca Guadagnino's films is that they sound like live sounds. What I mean by this is life is rarely silence. It's rarely void. You always have something that's in the way, sound wise. I mean, right now you're looking at me and you can hear me talking, and maybe, and I don't know, I'm gonna check in the editing, you can listen to the birds in the outside, and you can listen to the window that's open, and you can listen that there's construction sites somewhere in the distance, and you can listen to the size of the room I'm in, because we as humans are able to interpret that because of how psychoacoustic works. But I'm not gonna get into that right now. If you want, I can try to make a video about it, but it's complex, and I'm not a physicist. I'm actually not really good at physics, but because of how we work from an evolutionary standpoint, we are able to decode certain stimuli from around us to be able to navigate the world properly, and a lot of that depends on how we listen to things, how we hear things, and so we're able to determine the size of certain spaces, the distances between place and place. Just like out of sound, like we're always surrounded by sound all the time, and our vision is normally just restricted to 20/20. And so what I really love about Guadagnino is that Guadagnino's films is that his spaces, all of his spaces in the movies I'm going to talk about today, sound 360 all the time. Rarely in life do we have the opportunity to listen to something and just listen to that thing. There's always something that's splashing our field of sound. Always. And sometimes it's unbearable. You know, sometimes you can't listen to what someone is telling you because the space you're in has a lot of noise. Or sometimes, most of the time, life is not made precisely for us to listen to it in a more conscious way. And films aren't like this. Films, when you have a scene in a restaurant or in a crowded space, we can always listen to our characters properly. most other times because like mixing in recent years has been gone, and actors don't know how to speak properly, and many other things that I'm not going to talk about right now. And it's not like a kick to actors or anything. Like I admire actors a lot and what they do, but it is true that legibility sometimes, even though you're striving towards it, does not get to the point where it should be, but that rarely does spaces sound the way they sound normally or they would sound in real life. Guadagnino's films do sound real. Every single space in the Perlman's house in Call Me By Your Name, for example, has a very distinctive sound, because every single space in real life has a very distinctive sound, and it depends a lot on the material the walls are made of and the floor and the ceiling are made of, and how many people there are, and if there are any, and how many things there are in the room and what they're made of, and where it's located and what the space surrounding it is. And it's so beautiful how you can know, like if you, I tried this, if you watch the movie without seeing it and you just listen to it, you can tell exactly where they are because of what the place sounds like. And I tried this with The Favorite. No, that doesn't happen. It's plain dialogue. It's just like clear dialogue most of the film, and it's okay. Like that's a decision too. But what's very interesting about him utilizing his soundscapes like this is not only that, but also how much they tell us of the characters through this utilization of sound, but that also reads and goes to how he makes his movies to work for the characters and for his protagonists. He talked in a masterclass in the Mumbai Film Festival 2 years ago, I think, about how he likes to shine a light on the underdog and on otherness and on the breaking of the status quo. And if you watch his films, all of his protagonists are underdogs, and they're alienated people in general. They're different people. They're people that stand out from the rest of everyone that's around them, and you can tell this by how the sounding his films work. And I want to start my point with, because it's I haven't seen Queer. I'm sorry. I haven't seen Queer, so I'm gonna talk about Challengers. That's like the last movie I've seen by him, and how much we know of Tashi from the soundscape, because she is completely different in how the soundscape is treated for her to the rest of them, but that has to do with her nature. So Tashi, we know, is a very disciplined, ambitious woman. She's not very emotional. She doesn't let her emotions get the best of her. Never. Almost rarely ever. And she is hyper focused. She's super squared. She's beiges and whites and very strong, striking colors. She's that. And so when we are first introduced to her and art, the sound in the hotel room is flat. It's almost silence. We have the alarm, of course. We have a bit of like birds on the outside, but we don't have that much of an electric noise. We don't have that much of a whisper. We don't have that much of a wind, which we normally would have in other of his films. And when we do see them with other people, art physiotherapist and their child, Lily, and Tashi's mom, all of them don't make that much of a noise. The only sound we get is a bit of an electrical noise from a fridge, the TV talking about art, and a tiny murmur of Tashi and Art's child. And what we can read about the Donaldsons in this is that they're very squared, they're very disciplined, they're very clean. They're a clean family. It's very squared. And then you have in contrast Patrick, which is chaos, but I'm not going to talk about that. What I do want to talk about is the only times we listened to more wilderness and to more nature and to more trees rustling, wind flowing, murmur of people is whenever Tashi doesn't have a hold of her emotions. We get a sense of it when she's talking to Art about Patrick in the cafeteria. We also get a sense of this when they're next to the sea, but it's more controlled, it's rhythmic, it's the sea, she's controlling them. But we do get this sense of nature coming through. But the first time we really see Tashi out of control is after she, of course, spoiler alert, after she had her surgery for the knee, and she's sitting under a tree, which is I really think it's probably like my high point of the film, because it's a really beautiful moment. It's the first time we listen to what the university would sound like for real, what Stanford would sound, and what the trees and the rustling of the wind against the leaves and the people walking, everything. And we also get music, but not important right now. What is important is it's the first time we listen to the reality in the whole movie, and it's this first moment of weakness from Tashi, of lack of control, of lack of discipline, of absolute emotion. And then we don't get that until the wind storm. What happens with Patrick? We don't get that again until that point, which is obviously a lot of emotion, because even when Tashi was playing tennis, it was so hyper focused into the tennis that it's only the crowd going wild and the music, the crowd going wild when we listen to her. Another instance in which we have this same idea of the ambience being Tashi's discipline, Tashi's emotional world, is when her and Patrick break up. When they're making out, we have a very, 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 very slight wind and people in the background. Very, very, very slight. And as things get heated in the arguing, as well as the music, we get introduced to more and more sound from the outside of the window, even though we didn't listen to it before and it wasn't there before. And that helps my theory in Challengers. That's the way I find it, and it's different to the others because most of his other protagonists, except for Suspiria, I'm gonna talk about Suspiria in another film. I do want to talk about Io sono l'amore, Bigger Splash, Call Me by Your Name, Bones and All in this video. They're the complete opposite of Tashi because it's stories about fully emotional people. Tilda Swinton's character in Io sono l'amore, she's a very restricted woman, but even then, in her restriction, we can get this sense of loneliness and this sense of being left alone in how the house of her family, the Reki house, sounds. It's all marble and wood, and you can listen to the sound just like boom in there, and it's echoey. It sounds like a mausoleum. The Reki house sounds like a mausoleum when we start the film, and she feels so small in that house. It's only after she meets Antonio, who would ultimately become her lover, that she feels not only less alone but more in touch with nature and with like this savageness and of desire. Guadagnino touches a lot on desire in his films, and he also talks about it in the masterclass that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to link it down below because I loved it. I think it's super interesting to see about his creative process in that video. But yeah, we have these instances in which when she first meets Antonio, when she goes to see him, when she's with her daughter, her lesbian daughter, played by by Álvaro Juárez, magnificent Beta. We have these first instances of her being her true self through sound, in the sense that she is linked as a person to nature and to the wilderness and to the wind and to the rain. Guadagnino uses rain a lot, specifically in sound, because most of the times we don't see it but we hear it. And she, and her feelings and her desire and her actual self is very linked to this nature, this force of nature that is being held hostage in the Reiki house, so much so that she doesn't have a name anymore. Emma is not, or was not, her name. Actually, it's a name given to her by her husband when they met when she was in Russia. It's a very beautiful movie. I like it a lot. It's Guadagnino to the upteenth level. It's really great. I'm gonna address the elephant in the room. Yes, the image is different. My camera does not work properly. We're gonna do this with my computer camera because it's the only other camera that doesn't look like and doesn't sound like. Anyway, so we also have this way of relating this same nature of desire and sex and all these concepts with food, and Guadagnino uses that a lot to give his characters some way of, whilst being surrounded by other people, being able to explore their desire and their love and their innermost wants. And in Yo Sono L'Amore we have this as well, because of course Emma and Antonio, her lover, first relate through food, and Emma's sense of self is very much tied to the food that she ate in Russia, and that's the way she keeps herself linked to her past. And it's the same way she starts relating to Antonio, because of course he's a chef, and it's not until they meet and she tries his food for the first time that the food sounds as much as it does. What I mean by this is that when she tries Antonio's food for the first time, we can listen to the cracking of the food in her mouth. We can listen to almost the smell. We can almost listen to the heat coming off of the food. And when she's in the restaurant as well, this happens, and it's much less subtle, because she literally gets thrown into like a different dimension of where she's alone, and we listen to the shrimp cracking and to the fork like really stomping on the plate, and to her slurping, and it's almost as if we're inside her head and we're listening to it inside of her head. And it's so interesting, and Guadagnino uses this tool a lot as well, the food, and in his other films, and I will talk about that in a second. But I want to keep talking about Yo Sono L'Amore and how, the way she relates to herself, her real self, and the people she feels safe with and she loves, is through these instances of food, and also of Mother Nature doing her thing. When she has a conversation with her daughter about her daughter's sexuality, we have this notion of rain coming, and we know that her way to show and to relate to her son, first and foremost, was always through food. She relates to Antonio through food, and she tells him her story whilst cooking for him, and they make love in the middle of the wilderness in San Remo with the wheat and flowers, and we have the little bugs and the cicadas and all these notions of summer and of heat, a lot of heat all the time. And when she finally confronts her husband to tell him that she doesn't want to be with him anymore because she loves Antonio and because she's happier with him, first off, I love this, that Guadagnino uses rain a lot in his movies, a lot, and wind as well. And when we first get this instance of her leaving is after, spoiler alert again, go watch the film if you haven't seen it. I'm pretty sure a lot of people haven't seen it. I cannot tell you a place where you can see it legally. Finding a DVD is very hard, finding a Blu-ray is very hard, but if you can get your hands on the movie, you should watch it. It's a great movie. I'm gonna do a spoiler and I'm sorry. It's a really big spoiler. So if you want to skip the spoiler, just like, I'm gonna put like a time thing or a timestamp. I don't know how to do it. I'm gonna do it. So you can jump to that and see my continuation of the analysis. When after her son's funeral, it starts raining, and all the Recchi family get covered from the rain except for her. And we listened, of course, to the rain before we see it, as per usual. And then when Tancredi goes after her, she's soaking wet inside a mausoleum, and we could obviate. I don't know if that's a word in English. I think it is. Obviate the rain, but it's still there. When she tells Tancredi she doesn't love him anymore, that she wants to be with Antonio, and that she wants to be free. And she goes out into the rain again, and we listen to the rain. Well, no, she doesn't. Tancredi leaves before. But we hear the rain outside, and it's the first time we see it rain so deeply. We start the movie with snow, but it's already fallen. It's stuck. The rain is stuck. And this is the first time in the movie that we see such a meteorological impact. The first time we see so much rain. And it could be read as the cliche of a funeral with rain, but I do read it as her nature and her true self and her willingness to get out of this is represented by that rain, by that relation to the natural elements. So that's Io sono l'amore, and then in that same space of rain and wind, we have also protagonized by the great Tilda Swinton, now playing Marianne, who is a rock star in a very David Bowie fashion, as one should, and she's in retreat with her younger boyfriend, played by Matthias Schoenaerts. I don't know how to say his last name. Schoenaerts. I don't know. Okay, so it is a remake from a movie by Jacques Deray with Alain Delon and Jane Birkin and Romy Schneider, I think. And yeah, so it's Tilda Swinton in the wilderness of Italy. It's an island of the coast of Italy, and she's there on vocal rest with her boyfriend. And I love this. Okay, and stick with me. She has a very clear decision in the movie, because the movie is about her and her partner, whose name is Paul, on retreat in the island, and then her manager, who's also her ex, comes to join them unannounced. Harry, played by Ralph Fiennes, with his newly known teenage daughter, played by Dakota Johnson, Penelope. And then she has this crossroads of what to do, because she's juggling in between her career of maybe staying in this like mindset forever, and in the same sense Harry presents her with this question again of come back to me, even though Harry's the one who introduced Marianne to Paul. Come back to me. And in that same sense, the two men in Marianne's life, which are also the two paths she can choose of what to do with her life, are represented by two different things in nature. Paul, the boyfriend, is directly related to water, and Harry is directly related to wind. How? Why do I say this? By sound, I'm talking merely by sound. Of course we see it, but it's mostly sonic. So, we start the film and we have the Marianne in an arena singing while starting a concert or something like that. And then we cut directly to Paul by the pool. What's the thing? Marianne and Paul are both by the pool, but only is it in Paul's frame, in Paul's shot, that we listen to the water in the pool. We cut to Marianne naked on a boulder, and what we hear is cicadas, the wind, trees being moved by the wind, and I think slight breath of her and things happening, like in the people existing in the way outside and all those things. And we know that they're in the same space because then later we have a like wider shot of the whole thing, and we see that she's exactly right next to the pool, but we don't have the sound of the pool in her frame, in her shot. When we cut back to Paul, we have Paul next to the pool, water, Marianne on the boulder, no water, and then a bigger shot of them, and we see Marianne next to the water, but the water is not there for her. And then when we get introduced to Harry, when Harry and Penelope arrive to Pantelleria, Paul and Marianne go pick them up. And since it's a tiny airport, you have the doors that lead to the outside to the airplanes, the baggage claim, and then you have like swinging doors to where people are waiting for the people that arrive in the plane. And what happens? Now when we first see Harry and Penelope, they're in the baggage claim area, which is in between two areas that connect to the outdoors. Both areas connect to the outdoors through automatic doors. And when we first see Harry, he's in the baggage claim with Penelope. When he's introduced to us through Marianne and through Paul, we have a shot of him coming directly towards Marianne, and we see like the doors opening, and there's a wind gush coming to us as Harry comes to us. And there's this same relation of the wind and the water towards each of our characters through the film, through sound. Mainly when Paul has the decision of whether to, spoiler alert, Harry's underage daughter or not. Or we listen to his water and the ocean and all of that. Even and yes, there's a very clear body of water next to them, but we listen to the water. And then when Harry presents this question to Marianne of whether or not they should get back together, there's literally like a windstorm like in Challengers, which is another thing that's repeated. And another notion that's repeated, I do believe that Patrick is related to wind in the same way Harry is related to wind. Challengers, I mean. And so of course we have Marianne moving in between these conflicts throughout the film, and in the end neither of them win because of the circumstances that happen. And I'm not gonna spoil this movie for you guys because you have to go see it, and also I can save the spoiler. But in the end we have both together, because she can have both together. and we see it clearly in her signing the record in the end of the film, but also we see it with the wind and the rain together in a huge like storm, hurricane storm. And yeah, that's another way of how he relates his sound to his characters. There's the same instances of desire being presented through nature and through food. And we also have another like, take this same notions I gave and I've talked about from Yo Sono Amore and Bigger Splash as a same way for Elio. Elio is more tightly related through sound to Emma from Yo Sono Amore than to Marianne from Bigger Splash, but they're all related to each other in the same sense that nature works directly for their character development and their conflict and what they feel and what they're looking for. And in that same sense, food, Elio and Oliver relate in the same way as Emma, Antonio, and the food in Yo Sono Amore. The same instances of food having the volume turned up as affects your sound is also very present in the rest of the movies we talk about. Also in Challengers, has this notion of how to relate to someone without being obvious through food. I think the most obvious, obviously, is the peach in Call Me By Your Name, but the churro in in Challengers. Churro in Challengers is sex, whatever. I do believe that Patrick had a lot of did have a lot of sexual desire towards one another, Art and Patrick. But Call Me By Your Name has another notion that I first noticed when I saw the film for the first time when I was 18 and I hadn't started my sound studies and my film studies, which is there's a fly presented to us, which makes sense because in the summer there's a lot of flies because of the heat, because of the cycle of life, because things go rotten and they rot faster in the summer because of the heat. And so in Call Me By Your Name we have the same instances of Elio being small and overwhelmed by his circumstances and by the space he holds, that he also is related to the nature around him in a more primal way, like Emma in Yo Sono Amore. And the wind represents his desire for Oliver, and this like first question of his desire. And the rain is also the doubts he has, and his unresolved feelings. But we also have that stated with the fly. We are first introduced to the fly when Elio is starting to think of Oliver in a more sexual way, and it's there a lot, and we generally don't see the fly, but it's there. And when after they first have a sexual encounter, the fly goes away. Well, when Elio starts having doubts about Oliver again, the fly comes back, and we only get it by sound. We see her for the first time when she's introduced, but then we only get the fly by sound. And it to me personally, of course, like quick parentheses, everything I'm saying in this video is entirely subjective, and it's entirely my point of view and how I've read these films. I am by no means saying that Guadagnino made these films like this, and actually he never talks about his sound. So this is purely conjectural. This is purely my read of the films. But yeah, for me, closing parentheses, For me, The Fly and Call Me by Your Name is directly related to Elio's doubt in himself, represented through his desire for Oliver. And even though the wind, because I don't if you've seen the film, try to remember how nasty the doors hitting in the hallway are when Elio is like questioning why Oliver isn't coming to him. The wind is very, very present in the Perlman house because of the long hallways and all that. We also have the rain, which also represents like his doubts in regards of Oliver. And we also have obviously the most beautiful scene in the movie for me, which is almost the most beautiful. Is it better to speak or to die? I love that. In that whole scene, there's rain, and we listen to the rain outside, and we know Elio is questioning things about himself, about his sexuality, about his relationship with Oliver, because is it better to speak or to die? And then the last time we get the rain is of course when Elio's father, when Mr. Perlman gives him the best speech any coming of age character has been given in any film ever. And because I know I've watched every single film ever made. Obviously I haven't. We also have the rain, and we kind of see it, but we hear it throughout the entire monologue. We hear the rain, and it's the same notion of Elio having doubts about what happened with Oliver. Was it real or not? And then the fly is his doubts on himself and on his ability to be loved. And in the first part of the movie, of course, and in this movie, that is represented by Oliver, because at the end of the day, Elio and Oliver supposedly loved each other, and at least from Elio's side, because it's a point of view we're following, Elio did love Oliver, and he was in love with him, and we're not completely certain of Oliver's feelings in any point in the film. And the last time we get the fly is in the last shot of the film, when Timothée Chalamet is crying in front of the open fire, and we hear the crackle of the fire, and we hear the sound of his family doing the Hanukkah thingies behind him, and we see and hear the fly for the last time, because his doubts have come back about whether he's lovable or not. And so he uses these notions all the time in his filmmaking, Guadagnino, of telling us about our characters a lot through the sound, how they relate to one another, how they relate to themselves, and we get the notions, but we're not being actually like fully aware of them unless we like pay a lot of attention. But yeah, like this same notion of desire, food, pestering of the bugs and the wind and the wilderness is very present, of course, obviously, which like cuts the entire line of sexual desire and food and life and eating as a literal, in a literal sense, eating the person you love. Of course, Bones and All. I saw it again because, like many times for my thesis, it's so good. Bones and All is so pretty. Such a great film. I really, 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 really loved it. The first time I watched it, I didn't like it that much, but having rewatched it many times for this, I love Bones and All. I think it's such a beautiful portrait. It's such a beautiful character work in general. And in the notes from a scene for, I think it's for Vanity Fair, that Guadagnino, Taylor Russell, and Timothée Chalamet did. They were talking about the scene where Lee and Marin meet for the first time, and Guadagnino said he really loved that there's a transition in image of Marin becoming the American landscape, the USian landscape, because I'm starting to use USian because I am also American, because I'm from Mexico, and Mexico is in America, and I'm also North American because Mexico is in North America. So USian. That well, really like this notion of Marin becoming the US landscape, the Midwest landscape. And in that same sense, and he's never, honestly, I haven't found a single interview where he talks about sound from a creative point of view. They talked a lot about sound for Bones and all, in the sense of how they created the sounds for the people that's eaten in the film, like the foley and all that. But they never speak about the sound creatively. And even then, when he says this idea of Marin becoming the US landscape, the Midwest landscape, he does the exact same thing with her personality, her sense of self, how she exists in the world, is in that same sense, in the becoming one with the landscape, because she's on the run and she has to assume these certain things that she shouldn't have to, but that she becomes one with where she has to go. And in the same sense of Tashi, but inverted, the soundscape goes when she's having really truly emotional moments. And I there's this very beautiful scene when Marin and Lee are talking, and Lee tells Marin what happened with his father, where the ambience, the sound completely goes, it leaves, and it's only them two and a song by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. But yeah, it's the same notions I talked about before, and it's also this direct relation of food connecting the characters in sexual ways, but since they're literally eating people, it's much less subtle. I really like that. And we also, even though it's the movie where Guadagnino could have gotten away the most with putting a lot of flies, it's one of the ones that have the least amount of bugs through a sound standpoint. And so, having said all this, what I wanted to do with this analysis of these movies that I really like, and that a filmography that I really, really love, is to put it in perspective how much sound can do for your film from a narrative point of view, because these are all things that we are being subjected to when we watch the film, and that most of us don't realize them. But we feel it. We notice there's something that's making things work the way they do because of what we're being subjected to. I remember watching, the first time I watched Call Me By Your Name, I didn't have any idea about sound on film. I mean, the basics of Ben Burtt going on a road trip to look for sound for the Star Wars films and things like those, like very basic things about sound I knew. But I remember distinctly the watching Call Me By Your Name in my house in Mexico, 3 a.m. It was raining, and yet leaving the movie feeling like, finishing the movie feeling like I was in Italy. Like I had just been in Italy for 2 hours, and I had never been to Italy at that point in my life. But I just knew that there was something that made everything around me feel the heat of summer and the smell of freshness. And I later, having rewatched the movie and going deep into Guadagnino's filmography, I've later realized that he uses all these tools to create the most real space he can, and then he uses that in his favor, and yet he does not realize he does it, or if he does, and I mean he must know because he does it all the time, he doesn't talk about it. And I think it's super, super, super interesting, these notions he uses and these tools he utilizes and he keeps coming back to, that if you watch one film, you could maybe get to them. But it's so funny watching all his films and actually being like aware that these are tools he keeps coming back to. I love that. Having said all that, I'm done with today's video and I'm going to the movies with my boyfriend right now, and I'm late already and I have to go pick up some candies and things. And I just want to thank you if you watched the whole video. I'm very grateful that you're here. I'm very grateful that you watched the other video. And also I have an interest in doing like shorter videos to talk about things I've been watching or I've been listening to, and probably I'm going to start doing that sometime in these next weeks. So if you would like that, let me know. Like little 15-minute videos about things that are making me feel things right now. Probably I'm gonna talk about the Mission Impossible saga because I just watched it the entirety of it, and I'm gonna go watch the new one this week. But I also was thinking on doing something maybe along the lines of Miley Cyrus's new album, which I find very, very interesting, and she's also putting out a movie about it, and I'm gonna go watch it on June 27th with my boyfriend. So I was thinking on doing that, so let me know if you want that. And also, if you liked the video, like it, subscribe. I'm gonna keep putting out videos about doing analysis and talking about films that I love, that I don't love. I also want to talk about TV shows, probably talk about Andor, which is the last show I watched that genuinely did something to me. I'm a huge fan of Star Wars, and Andor was it for me. And things like those. I'm gonna keep like talking about things I love. So thank you for being here. Once again, I'm Sofia. This is After Soth. And yeah, thanks.